I remember the moment they called me unfit, like it was branded into my skin. It wasn't the word itself, it was the way they said it, clinical cold, like a sentence being handed down in a courtroom where I wasn't a mother, just a case file. Evelyn Blake exhibits signs of emotional instability and unresolved psychiatric trauma that render her incapable of primary custodial care. The psychologist read from her report without even glancing at me. Across the room, my late husband's parents, Catherine and George Holloway, sat like statues in tailored grief. Not a tear on her cheek, not a single crack in his voice. But I saw it. The triumph. The small twitch at the corner of Catherine's mouth when the judge nodded. That was the moment I knew this wasn't concern for Autumn. This was a takeover. They waited exactly 6 weeks after Marcus died to file for emergency temporary guardianship. Marcus had barely been buried. His voice still echoed in our home, his shirt still smelled like cedarwood and mint. I was still waking up every morning thinking he was beside me. But none of that mattered, not to them, not to the system, and definitely not to the judge who looked down at me over bifocal lenses with polite pity. "She's not safe with you right now," Catherine said outside the courtroom. Her voice was so soft, so sweet it could rot your teeth. "You need help, Evelyn. We're just stepping in for Autumn's sake." But I had been getting help. I had a therapist, I was on medication. I had climbed out of postpartum depression by sheer will and for one reason only, Autumn. My daughter, my son, and now they were ripping her out of my arms. Autumn was 9, bright, artistic, quiet, but not in a broken way, in a watchful, observant way. She was the kind of child who drew stories before she could write them, who asked questions like, "Do stars get lonely? And if Daddy's in heaven, does he see me when I color?" I'd watched her fold into herself during Marcus's funeral, gripping the sleeve of my coat so tight it cut off my circulation. I told her, "I've got you, baby," and she whispered back, "I've got you too." But the world didn't care about that bond. The court took one look at my medical records. Yes, I had postpartum depression years ago and decided I was a risk. One clipped sentence in the report, patient previously hospitalized for emotional instability following birth. And just like that, my motherhood was placed under suspicion. They didn't see the bedtime stories, the therapy sessions I never missed, the drawings I hung on the fridge. They didn't see the way Autumn looked at me with that small nod she did when she needed reassurance, or the way she traced my wedding ring when she couldn't sleep. They only saw what Catherine fed them. She had power, of course. Money, influence, a clean record. George was a retired federal judge. She volunteered at every gala in the city. They were the textbook image of stability, and I was just a grieving widow with a therapy journal and a haunted look in my eyes. Until further notice, custody will remain with the paternal grandparents, the judge ruled. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I signed the papers. I kissed my daughter's forehead and whispered, "Remember who loves you the most." She held onto me so tight the bailiff had to gently peel her away. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back because if I had, I would have shattered. The next day, my name was removed from the school emergency contact list. 2 days later, Autumn's pediatrician called to tell me she'd missed an appointment, but I no longer had authority to reschedule. Within a week, Catherine had moved her into the Holloway estate, a gated property with white pillars and security cameras disguised as birdhouses. I couldn't even reach the front door without buzzing through a speaker labeled staff entrance. The first time I visited, they had Autumn brought to the guest house like she was royalty and I was a stranger. She clutched her stuffed fox, the one I'd sewn patches on 3 times, and sat beside me without saying a word. I tried to smile, tried to make jokes, but she just traced the seams of the fox's ear with her thumb. That's when I realized they were already trying to erase me. "You're scaring her," Catherine said after that visit. "You bring too much emotion, Evelyn. It's not healthy. Too much emotion." I wanted to scream. "Do you know what's not healthy? Being told your daughter is safer in a house where her grief is polished over with pearls and dinner napkins. Where tears are considered weakness and questions are answered with pills and piano lessons." But I said nothing. Because the judge had warned me one outburst and visitation could be suspended. So I started writing. Every night, every detail, every time Autumn whispered something odd, every look, every bruise, every sentence that didn't sound like hers. I wrote it all down, not because I had a plan yet, but because I knew someday I would. That someday began 3 weeks later. Autumn drew me a picture during our visit. It looked like a treehouse with bars. Inside, a small girl with big eyes. Outside, a woman with yellow hair me. But what struck me was the caption. It was messy like all her spelling. But it was clear. I miss my real home. She wasn't gone. Not yet. They hadn't reached her core. I held that picture like it was scripture. And that night I made a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead for permission to be the mother I already was. I would wait. I would watch. And when the moment came, I'd let her speak for herself. Because the thing about calling someone unfit, is that someday the very child you said I couldn't raise might stand tall enough to show you just how wrong you were. People think grief is loud. They think it's wailing in parking lots, screaming into pillows, collapsing to your knees in the rain like some scene out of a movie. But real grief, raw, weaponized, targeted grief, is quiet. It's a held breath that never releases. It's tea gone cold on the kitchen counter because you keep forgetting to drink it. It's your daughter's favorite song playing in the grocery store and you freeze in the canned goods aisle clutching a tin of peaches like it's an anchor. After the court's decision, I didn't fall apart. I folded inward. I moved into a smaller apartment, just enough space for me and the ghost of her laughter. I left her room untouched. The bookshelf still had the cracked copy of Charlotte's Web, still had the drawing she made of our family in the stars. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath Saturn. Now it was just me and empty space. But I didn't stop watching. The visitation schedule was cruel in its precision, 1 hour a week. Supervised, sterile, like prison visitation, except the bars were made of clipboard checklists and judgmental glances. They brought her to me like a stranger on display. Autumn was always neat, always quiet. But now she was silent. Her eyes, once bright with chaos and curiosity, had dimmed. Like someone had lowered the volume inside her head and told her to smile anyway. She held her fox plush against her chest like it was her shield. I didn't ask questions, not right away. Instead, I pulled a small sketchbook from my bag. "Want to draw with me?" I whispered, afraid to break whatever spell she was under. She nodded, slowly. We drew side by side. Her hands still moved like they used to, small strokes, no pressure like the paper might bruise. But what she drew, it wasn't flowers, it wasn't suns, it was a house, no doors. Just windows with shadows behind them, a spiral staircase that led nowhere, and in the bottom right corner, a girl with no mouth. I said nothing, not to Autumn, not to the social worker who hovered nearby, but that night I documented every detail. I scanned the drawing. I sent it to Claire, the lawyer, who had once been Marcus's colleague and my only ally now. "She's talking," I told her, "just not with words." Claire agreed. "If we can get enough of this, enough patterns, enough subtle evidence, we can push for a motion to reopen the custody case. But it has to be airtight. They'll come for you the second they smell an accusation." And I knew that. The Holloways didn't make mistakes. They made deals. They knew how to smile for cameras and strangle you with silk. But Autumn wasn't broken. Not yet. Not completely. And that gave me time. In our next visit, she drew again. This time it was a cage, a bird inside. The door opened, but the bird just sat. At the top of the page, she'd written in shaky pencil, "The bird forgets how to fly." I looked at her. "Is that how you feel?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. Once. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The Holloways had her enrolled in a private tutoring program, now no more regular school. It's for her well-being, Catherine had argued. Too much exposure to trauma narratives at school. Translation control her, isolate her, make her forget I ever existed. They limited screen time. They censored books. They told her therapy was for damaged people. But Autumn still had her fox, and one day she brought it to our visit and pressed it into my hands. "I think he's sick," she said softly. I took the plush and instantly felt the difference. It was heavier, stiffer, and when I squeezed its belly gently, I heard the faintest click. There was something inside. That night, I dissected the fox. Inside, beneath the stuffing, tucked behind a layer of felt, was a small flash drive. I didn't sleep that night. I called Claire. I brought the drive to her at sunrise. "Whatever's on here," I whispered. "Autumn wanted me to see it." She chose to show me. We plugged it in. There were 3 files. One was video, shaky, grainy, clearly recorded on a hidden camera. It showed Autumn in her room, Catherine entering without knocking, her voice sharp, the words cruel. "You're not seeing her again, do you understand? She's sick and she makes you weak. You belong to this family. You will behave like a Holloway." In another clip, Autumn tries to answer a question at dinner and is mocked for her melodrama. George slams his fist on the table. Catherine hisses, "Look what your mother taught you." All that crying. And the third file, a voice memo. Autumn, whispering, "If anyone ever hears this, please know I want to be with my mom. I know what love feels like, and it doesn't live in this house." I broke, for the first time since court. I curled on Claire's office floor and sobbed like I was giving birth to pain itself. "She's just a child," I choked. "She shouldn't have to be this brave." Claire didn't hug me. She handed me tissues and said, "Then make sure her courage isn't wasted. Let's get to work." We didn't go to court right away. That would be a mistake. Instead, Claire filed quiet motions. We compiled a dossier. Not just the footage, witness statements, school records, medical neglect notes we hadn't seen before. Every brick the Holloways built their lie with, we dug up and logged. But most importantly, we waited. We waited for the court to ask, "Does Autumn want to speak?" We knew they wouldn't listen to me. But maybe, just maybe, they'd listen to the one voice that had been silent the longest. And in the meantime, I prepared. I learned custody law, I studied past rulings, I trained myself to keep a straight face even when every bone in my body wanted to scream. Because war isn't just blood and chaos, sometimes it's waiting. Sometimes it's watching your daughter hand you a broken fox and realizing that even in the cage they built, she's still flying toward you, even if they clipped her wings. I used to believe silence was defeat. That if you didn't fight back loud enough, if you didn't scream, cry, argue, or fall apart, then they'd win. That they'd rewrite your story while you stood there mute, erasing your motherhood with pens dipped in cold ink and practiced smiles. But Autumn was teaching me something else. She was teaching me that silence could be strategy, and hers was surgical. After the flash drive, everything changed. Not visibly, not publicly. The world still thought the Holloways were saints in tailored suits. Catherine still showed up at fundraisers in pearls and powder blue blazers, cooing about her sweet, sensitive granddaughter. George still played chess at the country club, telling lawyers half his age how to tighten up a case. But under the surface, a war was humming. We had their faces on video, their voices, their manipulation. But we didn't release it. That wasn't the plan. Instead, we waited for the custody review hearing scheduled 6 weeks from the day I held that broken fox and found my daughter's voice inside it. In the meantime, Claire filed a sealed affidavit requesting judicial review of new evidence without revealing what it was. She marked it as potential child endangerment with a confidentiality clause to prevent Catherine from interfering. The court ordered a hearing. The Holloways weren't worried. They thought I was bluffing. Catherine even sent me a message through the court liaison. "You're embarrassing yourself. Autumn is thriving. Let it go." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Autumn started to change in those final visits before the hearing, not in a way that concerned the social worker. No, they were looking for breakdowns, for tantrums. They didn't recognize rebellion in its quietest form, but I did. I saw it in the way she sat taller, in the way she looked me in the eye longer. Her drawings changed too, still coded, still metaphor, but sharper, more deliberate. One week, she drew a lion behind a cage. The next week, the cage was open. And in our last visit before the hearing, she passed me a folded note tucked into the sketchbook. All it said was, "I'm ready." The day of the hearing, the courtroom was too cold, always too cold, like the temperature was designed to keep emotion in check, like they wanted you to feel out of place in your own pain. Claire wore a navy suit, her hair pinned back like a blade. I wore black not to mourn, but to match the armor in my chest. Autumn walked in between two court-appointed aides, her fox in her hands patched up by my stitching. No one took it from her. Catherine sat across the aisle, impeccable, untouched. She met my eyes once, and for the first time she looked uncertain. The judge opened with procedural notes. Then Claire stood. "Your Honor, we respectfully request that Autumn be given the opportunity to make a statement should she wish to do so. As per Family Code Section 3042, a child of sufficient age and maturity may express custodial preference in chambers or in open court." "She's 9, Catherine's lawyer objected. "She's a minor and emotionally susceptible. This is inappropriate." The judge paused, looked at Autumn. "Miss Holloway," he said gently. "Would you like to speak?" She stood, without a word, without a glance at anyone. She walked to the front of the courtroom and climbed the step stool behind the microphone like she'd done it in her dreams. The room held its breath, and Autumn spoke. "I don't want to live with my grandparents anymore," just like that. No tremble in her voice, no apology. "I love them, but I don't feel safe with them. I don't feel like me." Catherine shifted in her seat. Autumn reached into her plush fox, pulled out a tiny flash drive. "I brought this because I want you to hear what it's like when no one's watching, when they think I'm too small to understand." Claire took the drive. The judge nodded. The bailiff plugged it in. The first video played. Catherine's voice filled the courtroom. "Stop crying, Autumn. Your mother made you weak. She was always weak. You're a Holloway now. Act like it." The silence in the room thickened. George's voice followed. "If you ever talk back again, I'll have you homeschooled for good. You think you're clever? Your mother thought that too, and look what it got her." The audio ended. Autumn stood there, small but unmoved. The judge didn't ask any questions. He didn't need to. He looked like a man who'd just had his mirror cracked. "I've heard enough," he said. "Full custody is hereby granted to the child's mother, Evelyn Blake, effective immediately. Visitation rights of the grandparents are suspended pending investigation into verbal and emotional abuse." Catherine let out a gasp like someone had punched her in the chest, and for the first time I did look back. I met her gaze, and I smiled. Autumn ran to me, no theatrics, just a run, a collapse into my arms that made the world finally feel real again. Like gravity had returned, like I could breathe. I didn't cry. She didn't either. We were past that now. Outside the courtroom, reporters buzzed with rumors. Someone had leaked the moment, not the footage, but the outcome. Grandparents lose custody in shocking turn. Claire handled the press. I handled my daughter. We walked to my car, just the two of us. She buckled herself in her fox still in her lap. Was I okay? She asked softly. I turned to her, brushed a strand of hair from her face. You weren't okay, I whispered. You were extraordinary. That night I tucked her into her real bed, the one that still smelled like lavender and rain, the one by the window where the stars looked close enough to touch. As I pulled the blanket over her shoulders, Autumn looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. They tried to take you from me too, she whispered, but I remembered what you always said. What's that? I asked. That truth doesn't have to shout, she said. It just has to show up. And it had. Right when it mattered most. The courtroom had never been kind to me. The first time I stood here, I was grieving raw trembling in shoes that barely fit because I'd lost weight from crying through dinner every night. They said I was unwell. They said I was unstable. And I had no proof to offer but the ache in my chest and the way Autumn clung to my coat like it was life support. This time, I was different, and they didn't see it coming. The hearing room was nearly empty now. The decision had been handed down hours ago. Autumn was officially back in my care. The judge's gavel had dropped like a final heartbeat, sharp and full of something that tasted a lot like justice. But we weren't done yet, because Claire had one more card to play, and the Holloways were still sitting in the courtroom, stunned and silent. Your Honor, Claire said, standing tall with a calmness I envied given the nature of the evidence just presented and the severity of the emotional abuse suffered by the child. We respectfully request an evidentiary motion be heard regarding the falsification of testimony during the original custody trial. The judge raised his brow. Go on. Claire turned slowly, deliberately toward Catherine. We have reason to believe that several pieces of psychological documentation used to sway the court's prior decision were not only taken out of context but altered. The gasp that escaped Catherine's lips was small, but I caught it, like the first crack in a stained glass window. Beautiful, brittle, irreversible. Claire handed the judge a folder, inside the original mental health report that the Holloways had submitted to the court months ago. And next to it, the real report, the unedited one, the one I'd managed to get when Claire tracked down my former therapist, who had moved out of state and never authorized any release of records. The copy presented by opposing counsel had 3 pages omitted, Claire said, specifically the conclusions and recovery notes. The real document shows consistent treatment, stable progress, and an endorsement for full custodial capability. The judge flipped pages, slowly frowning deeper with every turn. George Holloway finally spoke. This is nonsense. We didn't touch anything. It must be a mistake. Claire didn't flinch. No mistake, she said. Because the metadata on the document your legal team submitted shows it was modified 2 days before the hearing. She clicked a remote. A screen lit up behind the judge's bench displaying the document history, highlighted the timestamp, the user, the Holloway firm's internal server ID. Silence fell like snow, deadly, cold. You forged my weakness, I said, standing now. My voice didn't shake. You doctored pain I already survived just to take my daughter. Catherine stared at me, her mouth slightly open like she was trying to form a sentence she no longer believed in. I didn't, she whispered. I thought I was protecting her. From me, I asked, or from the truth that you couldn't control? The judge tapped his pen once. I'm ordering a formal investigation into the handling of this documentation. If it's confirmed that evidence was falsified, the consequences will be severe. For now, all prior testimony submitted by the Holloways is hereby inadmissible in any future motion. That was the final cut. Not a scream, not a breakdown, just the gavel again. Just the truth arriving late but arriving loud. Outside, the sky had shifted, clouds breaking apart in patches of pale gold like the world had been holding its breath and was finally ready to exhale. Autumn and I stepped into the parking lot, and for the first time in nearly a year, I didn't look over my shoulder. Do you think they'll go to jail? She asked softly. I knelt beside her, tucked a loose curl behind her ear. I think people who lie always end up stuck with the truth, I said. And the truth doesn't go away just because it's quiet, she nodded. Like us. I smiled. No, we don't go away either. Claire met us by the car. They'll fight back, she warned. There will be appeals, spin, media games. I know, I said. But they lost the only thing they really cared about, which is control. Because Autumn wasn't afraid of them anymore, and neither was I. That night, Autumn asked if we could have pancakes for dinner. Pancakes and hot chocolate, she said, with the marshmallows you hide in the back of the cupboard. I laughed. You found my secret stash. I watched you once. You thought I wasn't looking. I paused. Is that how you learned to hide the flash drive? She nodded. I watched you hide your pain. I figured I could hide hope. God, this child, this miracle. After dinner, we sat on the couch, curled up under a worn quilt, watching reruns of her favorite cartoons. And when she fell asleep on my shoulder, her fingers still curled around mine, I whispered into her hair, "You were never just a witness, you were the verdict, and they never saw you coming." I used to think justice came like thunder, loud, violent, unmistakable. But when it finally arrived for me in autumn, it didn't roar, it didn't crack the sky, it whispered. It moved like a tide, coming in slow, carrying broken pieces of a life I once had, then setting them gently at my feet as if to say, "It's time. You can build again now." The official papers came 3 days after the hearing. Custody full, visitation none, investigation into the Holloways active. I didn't open the envelope right away, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to give Autumn the moment, on her terms. So I sat at our kitchen table, the one with marker stains from old craft projects, and laid the envelope between us. "This," I said, "is the end of one story." She stared at it, small hands folded like she was in church. "And the beginning of ours?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't open it, she just smiled, because she already knew. In the weeks that followed, I saw her come back to life in pieces. First, it was the return of her laugh, that deep belly roll kind of laugh that made the dog bark and the neighbors smile. Then came the mess, the good kind, the glitter on the floor, paint on her sleeve song, sung too loud at breakfast kind of mess. And finally, her voice. Not just the one she used in court, but the one she saved for bedtime, for stories. "For I love you," whispered into my shirt when she hugged me too tight. She started school again, public school, real classes, real kids, the kind of place where the world didn't pretend sadness didn't exist, where they taught her fractions and spelling, but also that crying in class wasn't something to be punished for. The teachers welcomed her back like a lost puzzle piece, said she was quiet but present, said she looked people in the eye when she spoke. "She listens differently," one of them told me, "like she's looking for something real." As I said, she found it. One afternoon, I found her at the dining table, scribbling with a pencil so furiously the eraser had worn to a nub. "What are you working on?" She didn't answer, just slid the paper across to me. It was a letter, sloppy handwriting, half-spelled words, but the meaning was clear. "Dear Principal, I want to change my last name. I want to be Autumn Blake, because that's who I am. Because my mom never left me. She waited, and I found my way back." I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my eyes fill. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I don't want to be a Holloway," she said. "I want to be yours." We filed the petition that week. It passed quietly, uncontested. And when the papers came in the mail, new name, new beginning, Autumn grabbed a pen, flipped to the front page, and signed it again herself, like she was etching it into the world. Autumn Blake. She said it out loud 3 times that night, like an oath, and I listened, not because I needed to hear it, but because she needed to say it. The Holloways never called, not once, not to apologize, not to deny. They disappeared behind their wealth and shame and carefully crafted narratives. But Autumn didn't ask about them, not anymore. She knew. Some stories don't get endings. They just get left behind. We planted a garden that spring. She picked the seeds herself, sunflowers, marigolds, strawberries, stuff that grows big, she said. I want to see it become something. Every day she watered them with a pink tin can, hummed while she worked, sometimes made up names for the plants. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind our little house, she pointed to a bloom just beginning to open. "This one's you," she said. "Why me? Because it grew in the dark." We framed the court papers, not to celebrate the fight, but to remember the quiet war we survived. The fox plush sits on her shelf now, patched and clean, a small crown of fabric flowers on its head, Autumn's doing. "I want to keep it," she said, "to remind me I can speak, even when it's hard." I nodded, and tucked the flash drive away in a locked drawer, not out of fear, but because some truth doesn't need repeating once it's spoken. Some nights when the wind howls and the house creaks, I still wake up afraid. The echo of courtroom voices, the weight of old labels, the scent of sterilized pain, it lingers. But I don't stay afraid for long, because every morning I hear Autumn's feet hit the floor. I hear her shuffle down the hallway, hear her call out, "Mom, what's for breakfast?" And just like that, the fear fades. Because I'm not fighting to be her mother anymore. I am her mother, no matter what they said, no matter what they tried to take. She chose me, not just in court, but every day since. She chose pancakes and bedtime stories and messy hugs. She chose scraped knees and glitter everywhere. She chose love, and she gave it a name, mine. As I tucked her in one night, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Do you think I'll be brave forever?" I kissed her forehead. "No," I said. "But you'll remember how you were brave when it mattered." And she smiled. That same small smile she gave me in the courtroom right before the world shifted. Then I'll be okay, she whispered. And I knew we both would.